bless them and let them be encouraged. And those that are watching tonight will be encouraged. Father, continue to be with Diana and Miss Nell's family and bless them, Father, during these transition times. And Jesus, we just thank you for healing the people of our church and blessing us in every possible way. And thank you that all the blessings of Abraham are ours through Christ. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Isn't that good to know? So I guess we ought to talk about what those blessings are. So if you're in Genesis chapter 12, we talked about the issue with the Tower of Babel. I know it seems like forever ago that we were talking about it, but we talked about that, how God distributed the people. He split them up and confused their languages, but they still took their same ideas with them everywhere they went. And we talked about one of the places that they set up, at least the place that they had built the tower, continued to be a civilization, and it grew. If you studied in world history, the first great civilization that we know of was the civilization of Sumer, or the Old Babylonian, not the Neo-Babylonian. That was the one with Nebuchadnezzar, but the first Babylonian empire. And they were between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and we know some of the names of the people. Their great contribution to civilization was in the area of law. The Ur-Nammu. If you studied about early law codes, Ur-Nammu and some of the others that came from that area are famous. We got a chance when we were at the Museum of the Bible to see some cuneiform cylinders, which is how they wrote. They would take clay, wet clay, and they had a wooden stick that was sharpened that looked like a cone on the end. And they would take that cone and they would make symbols. And those symbols represented words or portions of words. And that cone shape is where we get the word cuneiform from. So cuneiform writing was the first form of writing that we know of. And that was in the Sumerian civilization. Would somebody pass Miss Charlotte the mic there? That came a little later. Rosetta Stone was found, I'm trying to remember, it was in Egypt where they found it. And that was Napoleon's people that found that. But it had Babylonian language, but it was the New Babylonian. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe they had hieroglyphics. We didn't know how to interpret hieroglyphics until they found that stone. And since it was written in 3 languages, and we knew 2 of them, so we could interpret what those hieroglyphics meant also. So that was the first step in them identifying. That's very good. And they had an exact replica of the Rosetta Stone there at that museum. So if you go to the museum, you'll see what Miss Charlotte's talking about. Grab a mic. Grab a mic so we can share this with everybody.
Isn't that neat that wasn't just one language, but it was 2 languages we knew. Therefore, there could be a validation with the other language.
Absolutely. Kind of like triangulation in mathematics.
I think God wanted it to happen.
Absolutely. And that was amazing that, of all people, Napoleon was invading the country and found it. So his people did. So anyway, this was a great civilization. They worshipped false gods. Ishtar, where we get the word Easter from, was one of the false gods of Babylon. Marduk. There were some others. We're not really sure all the gods they worship. We know more from the New Babylonian Empire, but this was long before that. This was a good time before that. But it was in the early empire that Abraham was called out. So he was there. There were 5 great cities in Babylon. Ur was one of those city-states, one of those large cities, and that's where Abraham comes from. I'm way ahead of myself. My mind is going faster than my mouth can here. So let's start in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1. We're going to read and we're going to talk about it. Now the Lord said to Abram, remember he doesn't have his covenant name yet, go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land which I will show you. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great. And so you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those that bless you, and the ones who curse you, I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. That word for all means the whole group of all the families on our planet will be blessed. It was really cool. I don't know why I looked that word up today. Yes, my mic is on. I hear it up there. So as long as he's getting it, you got it going fine up there, Mike? Okay, great. So in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. Now later on, God's going to establish this covenant. So understand that this time it does sound like it's cutting out. It's probably because I'm sitting on the mic again. I think I'll just put this little rascal right here, Mike, and I'm going to try not to mess with it. So let's talk about this. We talked about the 5 elements of a covenant, or actually 6 elements of a covenant. One, it's based on a relationship. Well, there are some people that try to say Abraham worshiped false gods when he was in Babylon. But the Bible never, ever says that, never even hints at that. That comes out of extra biblical writings. And if our covenant is based on a relationship with God, that would lead me to the idea that Abraham knew who God was. That even though he lived in a land of idolatry, they certainly did worship false gods in the Sumerian kingdom, the old Babylonian kingdom, that he recognized who God was because he responded to God. It wasn't like this was some new being to him. So it's based on a relationship. Second, it's based on choice. When we talked about this, it was based on election. God chose Abraham. His line was from the line of the sons of God. We talked about that back in the beginning of Genesis, that there was those 2 lines, the ones that followed God and those that didn't. And he was from that line. So from the line of, he was a Shemite. He was from the line of Shem, one of Noah's children. So based on choice, here's the words of this covenant. Now, these words are going to be added to, and some ideas are going to be added to it as Abraham lives longer. So this is when he's about 75 years old, or maybe even younger. He may have been younger. We don't really know. It was 75 when he left Haran. So here are the words. Go where I send you. I will make you a great nation, and your name will be great. You will be a blessing. Those are all promises God is making to Abraham. I'll bless those that bless you and curse those that curse you. Look at the people that have stood against Israel and fought against them. I think of the Muslim people today that are still living in the Stone Age. Really, they are. You think about it. Y'all get what I'm saying? Come on in, Margaret. Got another chair over here? Yeah. Think about it. They're borrowing technology from other people. They just don't prosper. They could, but they're not. And of course, there are some segments of it that are of Islam that is. But those that have come against Israel, they never do well. And that should tell you something. And I'm not going to put down the UK, but the UK was a big supporter of Israel until after World War II. And you all know we were not the world power in World War II. Britain still had the largest navy and stuff. We became the world power after World War II, probably during World War II. But Britain is not, they're a great nation and they're one of our friends, but they're not the nation they used to be. And they kind of turned against Israel, and it's a shame that they did. So don't want to go against Israel. That's God's choice. It's the same with people that choose to go against Christians and Christianity. We're his people too. Don't do that. Don't do that. So, and then finally it says in you all, that means all of your offspring, all families of the earth will be blessed. And he's going to say the word offspring later, which is the word seed in Hebrew. So, but he doesn't use that word here. All the families of the earth will be blessed. And then what was the sign? To me, the early sign was Abraham obeyed, and what started to happen to Abraham? I'm sorry? He was blessed. Boy, he became wealthy. By the time he and Lot are in the land, they become so wealthy that the land can't sustain them anymore. They have to divide. They have to split ways. So, and it just continues to grow and continues to grow, continues to grow. Why? Because it was based on God's promise. Now, there was still an obedience involved, right? Abraham had to do what God told him to. If Abraham had stayed in Ur of the Chaldees, we would have never heard about him. Now, God already knew what Abraham was going to do, right? God chose him. For those he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his son. That's the same in the New Testament. God calls us. He already knows what we're going to do. He'll call you anyway, whether you choose to disobey and walk away from him or not, but he already knows what you're going to do. So that's the good news here. He chooses Abraham, but he knows Abraham's going to follow, and of course Abraham does. That doesn't mean that Abraham was perfect. It just meant that Abraham chose to obey God. So, and then the last part is the blood, and there is no blood originally in this. So, but there is going to be blood when the covenant is renewed over and over and over again. And you're going to find out one thing about Abraham. He was an altar builder. He built altars everywhere he went. And what do you do on an altar? You make sacrifices. You worship. That was the way you instituted worship. So he was a worshiper. And today, we don't have to make the sacrifice. Sacrifice has already been made. And we can set up an altar every time we come to church, in our living room, when we're sitting down reading our Bible. We can have an altar where we can worship. Okay, so verse 4. So Abraham went forth as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. So Abraham, God gave Abraham the covenant, the contract. That's what covenant means. And Abraham signed the contract through his obedience. Isn't that cool? Think about that. God said, here's the contract. And Abraham didn't sign it with blood. He signed it in obedience. He got up and he left. He did what God told him to do. So here's a cool verse for you. James chapter 2. And you'll want to write this down. I'll even give you time to turn there if you want to. James chapter 2. We're going to start in the 21st verse. God's going to talk about Abraham. Yes, ma'am. Grab that mic.
So I've always thought that, yes, Abram did what the Lord told him to do by setting out, but he was supposed to leave his other relatives there. I don't think Lot was supposed to have gone with him.
I don't know that was, I know it said leave your family. I think what he was saying was not necessarily abandon your family, but he was saying this is where your family lives. You have to leave that place. So that's the way I've always interpreted it. I definitely see where you're getting that from.
Leave the area.
Leave the area. Leave Ur. Because he had a lot more family, I'm sure, that was there in Ur. You know, think about that. I don't know how big his family was. It was probably very large. And he's saying, leave your home, leave your family, and go where I show you. So when he left his home, he was leaving his extended family. Now, his father did go with him. And so did his brother, and so did Lot.
I noticed that when he left Ur, it wasn't Abram saying, let's go. It was his father who said, let's go.
It seems like it from the rest of the dialogue, or at least Terah says, he shared it with Terah, and Terah said, well, let's go. Let's obey God. And Terah goes with him. And they get to Haran. We're going to find out. It seems like they stayed in Haran for a season, which Haran, I'll do this backwards. So here's Babylon here. And the Fertile Crescent goes up like this. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers go up like this, okay? At the very top, just past the Tigris and Euphrates, which is where Syria is today, is where Haran was, their first stop. Then they had to go down to Canaan. It wasn't called Israel at the time. It was the land of Canaan, the descendants of Canaan. And so they went up there and they were intending to go down. You can't go this way because it's desert. So they had to follow the water. And then they went down. That's why they called it the Fertile Crescent. And that's where our earliest civilizations were. That's where the Tower of Babel was. And all those things was the plain of Shinar was between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. So all that early history started there. And remember, it spread from Mount Ararat, which was right up here. So, no, I'm sorry, I'm backwards. Ararat is here. The Tigris and Euphrates come down like this. Babylon was here. And then Haran was up here, and then Canaan is down here. And next week I'll have a map for you to look at, so you won't have to try to envision it. One of the first things when I took history, biblical history and geography, my teacher was also one of my pastors, the teacher at my Bible college, and he made us memorize a map of Israel. One of the best things anyone ever asked me to do. And we started with just drawing a map, then putting in the Jordan, filling in all the physical stuff, and then by the end, we were able to identify 150 different places. So amazing. Every week he would add 5 or 10 more. And, oh, it's great. So, and the cool thing, but see, now you've got a piece I don't have, because you can picture it in your mind. I have to see pictures in a book. But I know where they are in location in relation to other places because you memorize that map. Anybody can do that. When I taught it in Bible college, I made my students do the same thing because it was so valuable for me. So, yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, Miss Charlotte. Sorry.
Well, about what I was going to say. One of the reasons they left, I mean, you're talking about they maybe already knew about God or knew God there, but they still were idol worshipers.
It was a terrible place
Right.
of
So
worship.
maybe this is why God wanted Abraham and his plan for him and the generations to come to move out of that.
Absolutely.
So back, jumping ahead a little, I was reading in Genesis again today, but when Jacob went and left, after he went and got Rebecca, Rachel and Leah, and he was leaving, Laban accused him of stealing his idols.
Isn't that crazy?
So
and Rachel had done it.
Yes, she was sitting on them.
Yeah.
But,
That's what kills me,
but
that
they
she
were
was taking them with her.
They were still idol worshipers, even though they may have had some connection with God, too.
Absolutely did. I think they absolutely
I mean,
did
that
have a
was still
connection with God.
Another 2 generations.
The problem is when you worship more than one God, adding another God, no big deal, right? Just add another one. And I think that's in India today. You could go over there with all kinds of ideas because they've already got millions of gods, literally millions of gods, emanations from their 3 main gods. And so you could go over there with anything, and adding one more is no big deal. And that's kind of when Paul went to Greece and he saw that statue to an unknown God. He says, let me introduce that unknown God to you. He started right there telling them about Jesus and stuff. And so the people were like, well, yeah, one more God's no big deal. But then he told him that he's the real God, the only God, So anyway, great stuff, great conversations. You there in James chapter 2. Let's look down at the 21st verse. We're going to talk about a time period here. James has mentioned a time period that won't happen for another 40-some years, but it's still important. Was our father Abraham not justified by works when he offered up his son Isaac on the altar? You see that faith was working with his works, and as a result of the works, faith was perfected. And the scripture was fulfilled, which said, and Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness, and he was called a friend of God. You see that a person is justified by works and not by faith alone. Now, if you grew up in a Baptist church, this scripture will baffle you because it sounds like James is saying that you're not just saved by faith, you're also saved by works. But that's not what he's saying. He's saying the kind of faith that saves a person always shows up in works. That you're going to do something. Abraham didn't just say he believed God. He got up and left the next morning. And when Abraham was told by God to go sacrifice his son, he didn't just say, okay, I'll get around to it. He did it. So, and what he was saying was real faith, the kind of faith that saves a person, shows up in life change. Their life has changed. They obey God. They're ready to surrender. Instead of fighting with God all the time, they surrender. Doesn't mean you won't still struggle. Still make mistakes. Amen? Now, since you're almost there anyway, turn to Hebrews chapter 11. This is the Faith Hall of Fame because it's going to mention Abraham again. And it's going to mention the event that just took place that we just read about. Hebrews 11, verses 8 through 10 says, by faith, Abraham, when he was called, obeyed, going out to a place which he was to receive for an inheritance. And he left, not knowing where he was going. By faith, he lived as a stranger in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, fellow heirs of the same promise. For he was looking for the city which has foundations, whose architect and builder is God. It's amazing. By faith, he obeyed God. Now, did God tell him to go to the land of Canaan? Not yet. God just told him to leave his country and go where he was going to show him. So maybe he had shown him Haran at first, and he obeyed and went. Now when he's 75, we don't really know how old he was when God first called him, and we don't really know. I know everybody says God called him at 75, but that is not, if you follow the narrative, that's not really what happens here. At 75, God reconfirms the covenant to him. Now listen, now Abraham was 75 years old when he departed Haran, not Ur of the Chaldees. So how long had he been in Haran? We don't know. But we know that his father died in Haran. So I don't know if he went there until his dad died, or there was just a time God let him settle in, and his family, most of them, stayed there while he traveled on to the land of Canaan. Only Lot came with him, his nephew. So when Abram was 75 years old, when he departed from Haran, Abram took Sarah his wife, or Sarai his wife, and Lot his nephew, and all their possessions which they had accumulated, and the persons which they had acquired in Haran. Now what does that mean? The persons they had acquired. Yeah, but what are those persons that he had acquired? Slaves, servants, slaves, exactly. They were people that they had acquired. And that was still a thing back in those days. It's not a good thing. In fact, that book she lent me the book about Stephen Decatur. Great book called Old Ironsides. I finished it today. And it talks about Stephen Decatur, one of our early naval heroes here in America, who went out on the ship, the USS Constitution, that's still there outside of, it's in Maryland, right? Outside of Annapolis somewhere. Is it in Boston? Okay. I know the Naval Academy students use it. You might be right. You might be. I wouldn't argue. I know that they do exercises on it still occasionally. And I don't know if it's the original one or another one that they do it on. So, you're probably right. USS Constitution was one of our first ships of war. Big, it was a new kind of ships of war. And it used American oak. And one of the things about it, they said they called it Ironsides because the cannonballs bounced off the side when they tried to ship. But they used that in the Tripolitan Wars, which most people in America know nothing about. There were slavers in Algeria. And we couldn't send ships over there. They would capture our ships and take our seamen and our stuff, and they would enslave them and make them work for them. So there were a lot of American citizens that were slaves. There were people from England. There were people from Europe that had been enslaved, that were slaves there. And that's why Stephen Decatur went there with the Americans, was to destroy that empire. Well, empire that, by the way, there's still pirates there. There's Somali pirates and stuff. There's pirates in Africa that we have to be careful of still to this day. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Tripoli is the one. Yes, sir. Oh, the mic. Was your mic not on? Okay, it was on. Maybe it's just not turned up. Or the battery. Speak into it again, buddy. Oh, shake a little bit. Give it a shake. Why it needs batteries, I think. It's dying. Dying. Kind of like us when it gets this time of night. We start to die. We need some new batteries. All right, thank you, buddy. Okay, so yes, that's exactly where that comes from. So shores of Tripoli. So those are called the Tripolitan Wars. So that's a period in American history you can study. Think about that. We were a new country. Everybody thought they could pick on us because we were a nothing country. You know, we were just a bunch of colonists that had become a nation, and we weren't very strong yet. So that was a real proving ground for America. In fact, the first time, I didn't realize this till I read the book, they didn't have a lot of success at first. We lost a lot of our Navy people and some of our ships when we first went out there and had to come back with a stronger force under Stephen Decatur. So interesting. There's your little history for the night. That's exactly right. They were part of the Navy at that time, I guess, those guys that came on. Yeah, don't tell them that. Shh, watch out. You got a Marine up there. They don't want to be told that. Okay, so now Abraham seems to have lived for a season in Haran, we talked about, until his father had died. They moved then they moved to the land of the descendants of the Canaanites. And my question came up while I was reading this. Have we camped out in Haran in our own lives? Where God's told us to do something, we go so far and then we stop. And then we wait. We wait. Well, maybe it's time for us to get moving again, to inherit the promise that God's given us. The promise won't come if we don't go all the way. And so this is Abraham's time to leave Haran, the rest of his family, the ones that had traveled with him, and go to Canaan. And of course, Lot came too with his wife Sarai. So verse 6, Abram passed through the land as far as the site of Shechem, that was in northern Israel, to the oak of Moreh. Now the Canaanite was then in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, so this is again another time God's appearing. So at least 3 times now. This is the 3rd time he's appeared. Now the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your descendants, now when he says descendants, that's the word seed, I will give this land. So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. Then he proceeded from there to the mountain on the east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and called upon the name of the Lord. So this is at least the 2nd time he's built an altar. Abram journeyed on, continuing toward the Negev. Now, I'm going to tell you something really important about, I might do this later. Abraham is just like us. He often depended on his own ingenuity in difficult times. He was still learning and growing in his faith. We're going to learn about something he's going to do in a minute. But before we do, I want you to know Bethel, the word means house of God. Ai means ruin. He dwelt between them. Now, I want you to think of the spiritual picture there, because I've preached on this before. Dwelling between ruin and the house of God. That's a picture of our journey to heaven. It's where we are now, right? And we're going to find out that Abraham keeps coming back to this place. So this is in the middle to south of Israel. Yes, sir. That's still not working. Yes, brother, that is still not working now. Is the light on? Okay. Mike, that mic is still giving us fits here. I bet it is turned on. I don't know. Mike's, I have confidence in Mike. Well, the truth is, yes, when the people went into the land of Israel, that was the place they were supposed to completely wipe out. They were supposed to make a ruin out of the ruin. But there was a guy there named Achan, remember, who took some of the stuff. The whole city was devoted to destruction. They weren't supposed to take silver, gold, slaves, people, animals. They were to destroy it all. The picture is that this was a wicked place and God didn't want anything there in his people at all. And Achan didn't do it, and we know that because of Achan's disobedience, the nation of Israel suffered because of it also. So we'll get to that story a long time. That's after the Exodus. So let's go to verse 10. So I'm going to talk about this time of compromise. This is comforting to me. I know a lot of people read this and go, well, what's wrong with Abraham? There you go, brother. He's talked with God at least 3 times, and here he takes matters into his own hands. And aren't we the same way? God does miracles in our life. We trust him. He does stuff. And then comes down to where we're maybe in a time of danger or we're not sure what to do, and we use our own intellect and our own decisions to do things without consulting God. And Abraham's going to do this more than once. So here's what happens. Now there was a famine in the land, so Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there. For the famine was severe in the land. It came about when he came near to Egypt that he said to Sarai his wife, "See now, I know that you're a beautiful woman." Now, she's at least 65 years old right now. They did live longer, but, I mean, she must have been a knockout, 65 years old, and he's worried about it. "And when the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife.' And they will kill me, but they will let you live. Please say that you are my sister so that it may go well with me because of you, and that I may live on account of you." Now, she was a half-sister to him. So it was a half-truth, right? But he's like, let's twist the truth a little bit to keep me safe. "It came about when Abram came into Egypt, the Egyptians saw that the woman was not beautiful, very beautiful, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. Therefore he treated Abram well for her sake and gave him sheep and oxen and donkeys and male and female servants and female donkeys and camels." So even when Abram's messing up, God continues to bless him. Now, that's not an excuse for messing up and doing what you want. But isn't that the truth in our lives too? Even when we're not always doing the best thing, God's still merciful and gracious to us. He still continues to bless us. And verse 17, "But the Lord struck Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. Then Pharaoh called Abram and said," so somewhere down the line, he gets news that this is actually Abram's wife. I don't know if God appears to him. Now, God is going to appear to a man later and tell him the same thing when Abram does this again. But here, somehow Pharaoh knows. "What is this you have done? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she's my sister so that I took her for my wife? Now then, here is your wife. Take her and go." Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they escorted him away, and his wife and all that belonged to him. So our hearts believe that, she was taken into the harem. That doesn't mean that anything untoward happened. It just means that he was lining her up, and God protected Abram, and I believe God protected Sarah also during this time. So wouldn't let Abram make a mistake. And listen, God also knew that Pharaoh was innocent in this. Pharaoh didn't know what he was doing. And so God prevented Pharaoh from making a terrible mistake also. And Pharaoh's like, "Here, take her back." Now, if he'd have kept her, he'd have been in trouble, but he didn't. So let's go to chapter 18 now. 13, thank you, 1 through 18, I should have said. 13. So we're going to try. So Abram went up from Egypt to the Negev. The Negev is the southern part of Israel, as the deserty part on the south side, down by the Dead Sea. He and his wife and all that belonged to him, and Lot with him. Now Abram was very rich, not just rich, very rich in livestock, silver, and gold. And he went on his journeys from the Negev as far as Bethel. Now that's further north again. Still only halfway, not even halfway up Israel, to the place where his tent had been at the beginning between Bethel and Ai. So he's back to that spot again. Seems like that's where we are. This is also, okay, I've already talked to you about that. So, verse 4, "To the place of the altar which he had made there previously. And there Abraham called on the name of the Lord." So what did he do? He worshiped God again. He got back to that altar and he called on the name of the Lord. That means he worshiped, probably sacrificed. He did all those things that you do when you're worshiping. Now Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents. And the land could not support both of them while they were living together, for their possessions were so great that they were not able to remain together. It's important. Your company you keep is important. Isn't that amazing that the blessing of Abraham poured over onto Lot just because Lot was hanging with Abram? So, important to be around the people of God, to be around the right people, doing the right things, and those blessings pour out on you also. By the way, their main source of revenue was sheep. So they were shepherds. They had other animals too, but sheep are not like horses and cows. Anybody had horses and cows in here? You know, horses and cows graze. They eat the top of the grass. They leave the rest. Sheep root up everything. They eat the roots. They eat everything. So when sheep have gone through an area, you can't come back in a few days and get grass there. It's gone. That's the same battle we had in the plains here early on between the ranchers and the shepherds, the sheep herders. That the sheep herders were coming through and eating up all the grass, and the people that had herds of cattle were furious because there was no food for their cows. And so they had range wars. They had all kinds of things because of that. So they're having the same issue here. They're so wealthy that they got to spread out. They can't stay together anymore. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. Now, the Canaanites and the Perizzites were living in the land at the time. So Abram said, I love this about him, to Lot, please let there be no strife between you and me, nor between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are relatives. Come on, we're family. Is the entire land not before you? Please separate from me. If you choose the left, then I will go to the right. And if you choose the right, then I will go to the left. This tells you a lot about the character of Abraham and why God chose him and why he was so blessed. I've known people like this in my life. They're very, very generous. They don't have to force their way. They know God's going to take care of them and God's going to bless them. So Abram, let's start with this. He's a peacemaker, right? He says we shouldn't be fighting. In Matthew 5:9, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the sons of God. So he's a peacemaker. Secondly, Abraham was meek. He was the older one. He was the one that had the promise. This was his land, and yet he didn't fight to have his way. He told Lot, you choose. You choose which way you want. I'll take the other land, right? So Matthew 5:5, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. I love this. He didn't have to fight for it. He believed that God had already given him this land. It didn't matter where he went. The land was his because God had given it to him. Then Abraham trusted what God said, that all of this land was his. So he could be generous, right? He didn't have to. I've known so many people that were they held so tightly to what they have. They wanted what you had, and they wanted to keep what they had, and they always ended up being broke all the time. And it's the truth. I see it. The people that are like this all the time are broke because they haven't learned what being generous is. And some of the richest people I've ever known were the most generous people I've known too. And they just gave, you know. So and God's helped us to be generous on occasion, and we've seen as we've become more generous, God has been more good to us and blessed us more and more and more. So listen, when it comes to giving, learn the blessings of giving. Learn the blessings of giving. Learn the blessings of giving. And you'll be like Abraham. You know God's going to take care of you, and he does. So Abraham trusted God, what God said. This land is his. He could be generous. Proverbs 3:5-10. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight. Listen, do not be wise in your own eyes. Abraham could have said, this is my land. God gave it to me. Fear the Lord and shun evil. This will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. That's what happens when we trust God. And that's what Abraham was doing. So Lot chooses poorly. Lot raised his eyes, verse 10, and saw all the vicinity of the Jordan. That's the Jordan River. Y'all know where there's water. It's going to be lush and rich and green. That it was well watered everywhere. He could have split part of that with Abraham, right? He could have said, well, you take the northern half of the Jordan, and I'll take this. That way we'll both have plenty of grass. Like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt going towards Zoar. So Lot chose for himself all the vicinity of the Jordan, and Lot journeyed eastward. So they separated from each other. So you say, well, what was wrong with that? Lot chose based on what he could see and understand. He trusted in his own understanding, but it cost him his wife. It cost him all his possessions, because he went down and he began to live in the region of Sodom and Gomorrah. And you know what happened? God came through there and said, you got to get out. I'm destroying all of this. He didn't have time to go get his possessions. He didn't have time to go pick up his stuff. He had to flee, and his wife didn't want to go. That's why she leaned back. And I think that's what it meant when she turned around. I'm not talking about turning around to look. She turned around like, I can't leave. And she got caught in the mess where Lot and his daughters. Now, also, he set the example for his daughters, trusting in his own resources, trusting in what he could do. Now, I'm not saying he was an unrighteous man. He just trusted in himself. And his daughters did something very wicked. And I'm not going to talk about the story right now, but in their wickedness, they created two ethnic groups, tribal groups that became the enemies of Israel, the Moabites and the Ammonites. All because they couldn't trust God. They trusted in themselves. And we're going to find out that Sarah and Abram do the same thing, right? Later on, where they take their handmaiden and have a child. And that handmaiden those descendants are still giving problems to the Israelites today. We wouldn't have all those people that are fighting against Israel. So, all right. So let's move on. Verse 12. Abram settled in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled in the cities of the vicinity of the Jordan and moved his tents as far as Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were not just wicked, listen, exceedingly wicked sinners against the Lord. I love that when we sin, we think, I'm not hurting anybody. You're sinning against God. So, okay, let's talk about God renewing his covenant again. So here we are. I think Abram might have wondered if being humble and meek may have been the wrong way to handle things. You know what? When his nephew chose all the good land, I wonder if he was thinking for a minute, man, I don't know if that was such a good plan. It was his character. I'm glad he did it. But God shows up as soon as he does it. This is what I love about it. God shows up and talks to him as soon as they part ways. So verse 14, the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, now raise your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land which you see, I will give to you and to your descendants. That's the word seed again, forever. I will make your seed as plentiful as the dust of the earth, so that if anyone can count the dust of the earth, then your seed could also be counted. Arise, walk about in the land through its length and width, for I will give it to you. Then Abraham moved his tent and came and lived by the oaks of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and there he built an altar to the Lord. So he moved right smack dab up into the middle of the land. So he'd been in the southern part, he'd been down he'd been all the way to Egypt and back, but now he walked through the land and he puts his tents right in the middle, because this is his land. Grab a mic.
Where he was, he could see all the land that Lot had already gone to take.
Absolutely.
So the Lord was
good.
promising him that he was going to get the land that Lot went
chose
to.
Exactly. He was saying, you don't have to be afraid. This is your
Yeah.
land. I've already given it to you. And I love it. I love the fact, though, that he goes up in the middle of the land, too. So now he can see the here and here and here and here. He can see Carmel. He can see where Phoenicia is going to be later. He sees it all. And he travels it all, too, just like God tells him. Yes, ma'am.
On the other side of the Jordan?
I don't really know.
That's where Sodom and Gomorrah was.
We think. We're
Yeah.
not sure.
Okay,
But it does
well,
make sense,
That's
doesn't
what
it?
they say when you go over there to Jordan, that they take you to those places, and they say that's
Historically, that's what
Yeah.
we believe. Yes. Hard to say because it's a big valley now. You know, it used to be more flat. When God destroyed it, it left a big hole in the earth. That's the lowest point on land, between 1,350 and 1,400 feet below sea level. Not just down, below sea level. It's the lowest part on earth. Not underwater, but on earth. It's below sea level. So
There was parts that we went to, what they call the King's Highway, going down toward Petra.
Yeah.
But it was like desolate, and there was like charcoal stuff just scattered all out in that
Brimstone.
land.
yeah,
Charcoal. I
Charcoal.
mean, chunks.
yeah.
Like things had been burnt there.
Yeah, absolutely was. Brimstone. God called fire and brimstone to come down. Yeah, isn't that amazing? It's amazing that Lot was a good man. And I just want to tell you, he made a lot of mistakes, but he was a good man. You could see that when the angels came and he tried to protect them. And it wasn't that he didn't love his daughters. It was just that he was trying to protect these servants of God at any cost, even his own cost, terrible cost. But the Bible tells us that in the book of Hebrews that Lot was grieved in his heart living there among those sinful people. Now, I don't know why he didn't get out of there. He got used to it, kind of like we do. You know? Yes, sir, go ahead.
Well, there's a guy that is on Christian TV, had a show. He dresses up like he's from Bible times. I can't remember his name. Karen probably can remember, but
Was he a Jewish guy?
she can't remember. But
He's a Jewish rabbi.
Was it Zola Levitt?
no.
Okay. I saw him do that sometimes.
But anyway, he went down there and where Sodom and Gomorrah is supposed to be, and he found these balls, and they were sulfur balls, thousands. The place was covered in them. And so he took one back to his hotel in Jerusalem, and he said, well, I wonder if this will burn. And they evacuated the hotel.
Oh. And they didn't invite him back, huh?
No.
How about that? I guess it burns. Well, that's funny. That is funny. Okay. Anyway, Abraham, of course, is a worshiper. We talked about that. He built altars everywhere he went. And this was a visible, tangible place of sacrifice and worship. And just to sum this up, and you're going to see this, he's going to do it more. He's going to do it more and more. And finally, he's going to be asked to take his son and worship God with that offering. But God loves fellowship. The whole point of sacrifice is fellowship. God loves fellowship. Worship is the deepest, most intimate form of fellowship. And that's why you hear me encouraging on Sunday morning to enter into worship. And people are still trying to figure that, especially if you've come out of an older denomination or something where worship is just singing songs. And the church I grew up in, there were a few people that worshiped. And I saw them. I remember watching them as a child, watching them worship and know that they were connected to God. And I was singing, but I wasn't paying attention. I was watching these, especially these two old ladies, and I still remember their names because they had such a great relationship with God. But they would sing and their face would shine. Oh, man, and they were just sitting there smiling. And Hattie Stedham and Granny Rogers. And is that right? Well, Hattie Stedham was an older woman who'd been a widow for a long, long time, and then Granny Rogers was the grandmother of our pastor. And just, I would sit there, and I'm the picture's in my mind right now while I'm telling you this, of them doing this. They didn't really raise their hands, but they could have been. They were in their heart. People would have been ushered out of my church if you'd have raised your hands. Actually, by the time we left that church, there were people doing it. So, raising their hands. But it was just amazing. And they weren't the only ones. But they were the ones that every Sunday, the first song, they had already broken out into worship. They came in with that. They were smiling and happy, and their relationship with God was evident to me as a child. And, boy, don't you want to be that way to other kids when they see you? And when the kids come in here to chapel, I want them to see that on my face. And not putting it on, just being who you are, and sharing that love with them. So that's it for tonight. We went through 2 chapters of the book of Genesis. That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, no, this is good stuff. Now we're going to go ahead and go further into the life of Abraham and some of the mistakes he made. We already talked about one. He's going to make several. I love the fact that he's called the friend of God and the man of faith, and he's just like us. He still had questions. He still messed up sometimes. He trusted in himself sometimes, and it cost him when he did, but God had chosen him, and God continued to love him. God never cut him off or rejected him when he made those mistakes, and I love it because he kept turning back to God, just like David. I can't tell you off the top of my head, so Proverbs 3:5-10. Solomon. It's like Solomon. Listen to your own words, right? He writes this, and you're thinking, trust in the Lord with all your heart. What's going on with you, Solomon? Well, he probably wrote that when he was either younger or older. Because when he was older, you read the book of Ecclesiastes, he writes that when he's older, and he has learned a lot. And you think he's the wisest man or the smartest guy that ever lived. You would think he wouldn't have made those terrible choices. But he learned from those things. And that's what you can say about a person that's truly wise is they learn from their mistakes. Not just not having a bunch of knowledge. It's learning from your mistakes. Well, he made a bunch. 1,000 of them. Well, I don't know if 1,000 of them were mistakes, but he let them, sway him. Exactly right. He followed them instead of them following him. And it started with his first marriage. He marries a lady from Egypt. And one of the things God said is that they weren't supposed to marry foreign women. So it was convenient and political to do it, but it wasn't a wise choice. And he had a bunch. Concubines are gifts. They're women that aren't royal birth, but they're given to you as gifts, and so they're still wives. So he had 700 wives and 300 concubines. So he had 1,000 wives. He probably never spent time with